In the beginning, there was nothing but a dark void. Then God spoke, and light burst forth into the universe. He separated the light from the darkness, calling the light day and the darkness night. This was the first day of creation. On the second day, God made the firmament, which he called heaven. On the third day, God gathered the waters together into seas and made dry land appear. He caused grass and trees and plants of all varieties to spring up from the earth, creating a world of lush greenery. The sun, moon, and stars were formed on the fourth day to govern the day and night and mark the seasons. On the fifth day, God filled the seas with fish and other sea creatures, and the skies with birds of every kind. Then, on the sixth day, God made the land animals, cattle, creeping things, and beasts of the earth. Finally, as his crowning achievement, God formed man from the dust of the ground and breathed into him the breath of life. This first man was named Adam, made in God's own image to have dominion over the earth and all its creatures. God saw that Adam was alone, and so he caused the man to fall into a deep sleep. Taking one of Adam's ribs, God fashioned from it a woman as a companion for him. When Adam awoke, he rejoiced and called the woman Eve. To be their home, God planted a garden in Eden, a perfect paradise filled with beauty and bounty. Friendly animals of all kinds roamed its lush fields and woods. Birds sang joyful melodies in the treetops. For majestic rivers flowed through the garden, nourishing a wondrous variety of fruit trees and flowering plants. In the center of the garden stood two very special trees, the tree of life and the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. God told Adam and Eve they were free to eat the fruit of any tree except the tree of knowledge, warning that if they ate of it, they would surely die. For a time, the first couple lived in blissful innocence, wanting for nothing in their idyllic garden home. Adam worked the land and cared for the plants and animals, while Eve was his helper and companion. They delighted in each other, in the glories of creation, and in fellowship with their Creator. In those days, there was no sin, no sorrow, no pain or death, only goodness and plenty and joy. But not all was as it seemed. An enemy was plotting the downfall of mankind. The devil, that ancient serpent, sought to corrupt God's handiwork and turn Adam and Eve against him. Taking the form of a cunning snake, Satan approached Eve one day as she was admiring the forbidden tree. "Did God really say you must not eat from any tree in the garden?" the serpent asked slyly. "We may eat the fruit of any tree," Eve replied, "except the tree in the middle of the garden." God said, "You must not eat from it or even touch it, or you will die." "You will not certainly die," the snake scoffed, "for God knows that when you eat of it your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil." Eve gazed at the tree anew. She saw that the fruit looked fresh and delicious, and desirable for gaining wisdom. How pleasant it would be to eat something so enticing, to gain knowledge and be like God himself. Swayed by the serpent's deception, Eve took some of the fruit and ate it. She then gave some to Adam, who was with her, and he ate it too. In an instant, their eyes were opened and they realized they were naked. Sewing fig leaves together, they made coverings for themselves, hiding in shame from one another. When Adam and Eve heard God walking in the garden, they hid from him among the trees, suddenly afraid to face their Creator. But God called to Adam, "Where are you? I heard you in the garden, and I was afraid because I was naked, so I hid." Adam replied, "Who told you that you were naked?" God asked, "Have you eaten from the tree that I commanded you not to eat from?" Adam shifted blame to Eve and Eve to the serpent. But God held all three responsible for their part in the fall. He pronounced judgment on the serpent, condemning him to crawl on his belly and eat dust all the days of his life. To Eve, God declared that her pains in childbearing would be multiplied and her husband would rule over her. And to Adam, God said that the ground was now cursed and would yield thorns and thistles, requiring painful toil to harvest food, until death returned him to the dust from which he came. Banished from the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve stepped into a harsh world of sin and death, alienated from God and each other. Angels with flaming swords were set to guard the way to the tree of life, lest they eat of it and live forever in their fallen state. The age of innocence was over, but God, in his mercy, covered Adam and Eve's nakedness with garments of skin, foreshadowing a day when he would provide a greater covering for sin. Life outside Eden was hard, but not hopeless. Adam worked the ground and Eve bore children. Their first two sons reflected the divided heart of fallen humanity. Abel was a righteous keeper of sheep, while Cain was a jealous tiller of soil. In time, both brothers brought offerings to the Lord. The Lord looked with favor on Abel's offering, a choice lamb from his flock, but rejected Cain's offering of fruit from the cursed ground. Seething with anger, Cain lured Abel into a field and murdered him, spilling the first human blood. When God confronted Cain with his sin, he denied responsibility, asking insolently, "Am I my brother's keeper?" The Lord condemned Cain to be a restless wanderer on the earth, but mercifully placed a mark on him to protect him from those who would seek his life. As mankind multiplied on the earth, sin multiplied all the more. The wicked outnumbered the righteous and violence filled the earth. Only a remnant, like Abel, sought to walk with God. Enoch the prophet, who was taken up by God without tasting death. Noah, a preacher of righteousness who found favor with God. The Lord saw that the wickedness of man was great, with every inclination of his heart set on evil. Grieving over his corrupted creation, God determined to wipe mankind from the face of the earth. Yet he resolved to save one righteous family as a seed for a new beginning. God instructed Noah to build an enormous ark to survive an impending flood. For 100 years, Noah labored to construct the vessel, proclaiming the coming judgment to scoffing neighbors. No one repented or turned from their sins. When the ark was finally complete, God brought to Noah pairs of every kind of animal to be preserved. Then Noah and his wife, along with their 3 sons and daughters-in-law, entered the ark, and God shut them in. For 40 days and nights, torrential rains fell and underground waters burst forth. The oceans swelled and rivers overflowed, engulfing the land. People fled to the mountains, but the waters rose higher until even the highest peaks were inundated. All the wicked were swept away. Only Noah and those with him on the ark survived. A sea without shores stretched in all directions. After 150 days, the waters began to recede. The ark came to rest on the mountains of Ararat as the land emerged once more. Noah sent out birds, first a raven, then a dove to search for signs of life. At last, the dove returned with an olive leaf in its beak, showing that the earth was habitable again. On the first day of the new year, Noah removed the covering of the ark and saw that the ground was dry. Stepping onto a world cleansed by judgment, Noah built an altar and made a sacrifice to the Lord, a soothing aroma pleasing to God after the stench of sin. The Lord blessed Noah and his sons, telling them just as he had told Adam, "Be fruitful and multiply and fill the earth." God made a covenant with Noah, pledging never again to destroy the earth by flood. As a sign of his promise, he set a rainbow in the clouds, an everlasting reminder of his mercy and faithfulness. From Noah's sons, Shem, Ham, and Japheth, the earth was repopulated. Starting afresh after the cataclysm, their descendants spread out and settled in different regions. Some migrated southeast to the plain of Shinar, where they discovered rich deposits of clay and bitumen. There they learned to fire bricks and use mortar to build more permanent dwellings and structures. As the settlers' skills increased, so did their ambitions. Clustering together in a burgeoning city, the people crafted a daring plan. "Come, let us build ourselves a city with a tower that reaches to the heavens, so that we may make a name for ourselves. Otherwise, we will be scattered over the face of the whole earth." The tower grew taller and taller, a monument to human pride and independence from God. But the Lord came down to see the city and tower, rightly discerning that such collaboration would lead only to greater wickedness and grief. In judgment, he confused the language of the builders so they spoke in different tongues, alienating them from one another. Unable to communicate or cooperate any longer, they scattered across the earth, abandoning their half-completed tower. The unfinished ruins stood as a rebuke to man's arrogance, a place called Babel, meaning confused. Though the human race had divided, God had not given up on his creation. He would reveal himself to one family and through them bring salvation and redemption to the world. He called a man named Abram from the city of Ur to go to a new land that he would show him. Abram obeyed, journeying by faith to the land of Canaan, where God made a covenant with him. "I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you. I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all peoples on earth will be blessed through you." As Abram sojourned in Canaan, his herdsmen quarreled with the herdsmen of his nephew Lot. To defuse tensions, Abram generously offered Lot first choice of the land. Lot chose the fertile Jordan Valley while Abram remained in Canaan's hill country. After they separated, God reaffirmed his promise to Abram. "Look around from where you are, to the north and south, to the east and west. All the land that you see I will give to you and your offspring forever. I will make your offspring like the dust of the earth, so that if anyone could count the dust, then your offspring could be counted. Go, walk through the length and breadth of the land, for I am giving it to you." Abram pitched his tent by the oaks of Mamre and built an altar to the Lord. Though a foreigner in Canaan, Abram trusted in the promises of God, who later changed his name to Abraham, meaning father of many nations. Abraham and his wife Sarah were childless and advanced in years, but God assured them that they would miraculously bear a son to be Abraham's heir. After much waiting, Isaac was born to the astonished couple in their old age, an early fulfillment of God's promise to make Abraham's descendants as numerous as the stars. Isaac grew up, married Rebekah, and became the father of twin boys, Esau and Jacob. Though Esau was the firstborn, Jacob was God's chosen heir to the covenant blessings. One day when Esau came in from hunting, famished and craving the red stew his brother was cooking, Jacob offered him a bowl in exchange for his birthright. Esau rashly agreed, despising his birthright. Later, as their father Isaac lay blind and dying, Jacob, with his mother Rebekah's help, deceived Isaac into conferring on him the firstborn blessing. Esau was enraged and plotted to kill his brother as soon as Isaac died. So Jacob fled to the land of his uncle Laban, serving Laban for 20 years and marrying his daughters Leah and Rachel. There God prospered Jacob and gave him 12 sons from whom the tribes of Israel would descend. Though his name meant deceiver, Jacob learned through trials that it was God's blessing, not his own schemes, that would exalt him. In an all-night wrestling match with the angel of the Lord, Jacob clung to God until he blessed him and changed his name to Israel. He who strives with God. Of Jacob's 12 sons, he loved Joseph most. This favoritism, along with Joseph's dreams that his family would bow down to him, fueled his brothers' envy and hatred. When Joseph was 17, his brothers conspired against him, selling him into slavery in Egypt and telling their father he had been killed by a wild animal. But the Lord was with Joseph and gave him success as a servant in the household of Potiphar, one of Pharaoh's officials. When Joseph refused the advances of Potiphar's wife, she falsely accused him and had him thrown into prison. Yet even their God's favor was on Joseph, and he rose to a position of authority among the prisoners. When 2 of Pharaoh's servants were imprisoned, they each had troubling dreams that Joseph accurately interpreted, predicting the cupbearer's restoration and the baker's execution. 2 years later, Pharaoh himself dreamed of 7 sleek, fat cows being eaten up by 7 ugly, gaunt cows, and of 7 plump heads of grain being swallowed up by 7 thin, scorched heads. No one in Egypt could interpret these dreams, but the cupbearer remembered Joseph's gift and told Pharaoh about him. Brought from prison, Joseph explained to Pharaoh that the dreams were a warning from God. 7 years of abundance would be followed by 7 years of famine, and Egypt must store up food during the good years to survive the bad ones. Recognizing the Spirit of God in Joseph, Pharaoh put him in charge of the entire land of Egypt to prepare for the coming crisis. When the 7 years of plenty ended and famine struck, Joseph opened the storehouses of Egypt to sell grain to all who were hungry. The famine was severe not just in Egypt but also in Canaan, where Jacob and his family lived. Jacob sent his sons to Egypt to buy grain so they would not starve. Joseph recognized his brothers, but they did not recognize him. After testing them to see if they had changed, Joseph finally revealed his identity to his shocked and terrified brothers. He reassured them that it was not they but God who had sent him ahead to Egypt to save lives and preserve their family during the famine. Jacob and all his household, 70 persons, then came down to Egypt and settled in the region of Goshen, where Joseph provided for them. The sons of Israel prospered and multiplied greatly in Egypt, just as God had foretold to Abraham years earlier. But as time passed, a new Pharaoh came to power who did not remember Joseph. He saw the growing numbers and strength of the Israelites as a threat, so he enslaved the Israelites, oppressing them with forced labor to build his treasure cities. Despite their hardship, the Israelites continued to multiply. Pharaoh then ordered the Hebrew midwives to kill all newborn Israelite boys at birth. But the midwives feared God and spared the babies. Furious, Pharaoh commanded all his people to throw every Hebrew boy into the Nile River. During this time, a Levite woman bore a son and hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she waterproofed a basket, placed him in it, and set it adrift on the Nile, trusting God to rescue him from Pharaoh's edict. As the baby's sister watched from a distance, Pharaoh's daughter found the basket while bathing in the river. When she opened it and saw the child crying, she was moved to pity, recognizing him as one of the Hebrew babies. The sister stepped forward and offered to find a Hebrew woman to nurse him for her. And so, by God's providence, the child was nursed by his own mother until he was old enough to go to Pharaoh's daughter, who adopted him as her son and named him Moses, meaning drawn out of the water. But this is not the end of the story, only the beginning. For the God who created all things and set his bow in the clouds had not forgotten his covenant promises to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He had seen the affliction of his people, heard their cry, and was coming down to deliver them. Through a man he had drawn out of the water and was preparing for a monumental task. The Exodus and the journey to the Promised Land were yet to come. But through it all, one eternal truth would stand. The Lord is faithful to his word, and his plans and purposes will not be thwarted. For God, the all-powerful Creator, so loved the fallen world that he had made, that in the fullness of time, he would send his only Son, Jesus Christ, to offer himself as the ultimate sacrifice for sin. Christ's death and resurrection would open the way to eternal life, reversing the curse of the forbidden fruit and crushing the serpent's head. Through him, all nations would be blessed, just as God had pledged to Abraham long ago. The tree of life lost in Eden would be restored in a glorious future garden, its leaves for the healing of the nations in a new heaven and earth where God himself will dwell with his people forever.